Hi, I'm Andrew, and this is Blaster Breakdown. You may be aware that Sabre is now manufacturing Spectre's HPA cores. Today, very lucky to have my hands on one of the first batch of the new DMR core, which is an upgrade of the original Super core. These are functionally equivalent, although the DMR core does have a few small upgrades to the design. One major one is the brass receiver. It was originally designed for jet-threaded barrels. The new design fits Seagull and Harrier barrels. And so, what better blaster for my first DMR mod than a Harrier? Along with the cores themselves, Sabre has also designed various 3D printed pieces to make installing the cores in these blasters a breeze. Most importantly, a piece sitting in the grip which holds the pneumatic valve that functions as a trigger. This is now a remote line semi-automatic blaster, just the same as Supercore. DMR core is a closed bolt design. Full disclosure, Sabre sent me the DMR core used in this build. Everything else I purchased myself, including the Sabre B car up front. In today's video, I'll also talk about how the DMR core actually works, how it comes apart and can be put back together. So if you're not familiar with the internals of this component and how the core works, you might find that useful to understand how it all operates. Before we start though, if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to like if you enjoy my content. All right, let's have a look inside. Okay, before we start, I wanted to take a couple of minutes to step through how the DMR core works. If you're familiar with the Super core and how it operates, or the DMR core, feel free to skip ahead. But for those who haven't seen the inside of one of these, I thought it might help just to step through what's inside, how it works, how you might want to maintain it over time. So, purple bit is our shell. So that's the body of the core. We've got a few holes at the front here, and we've got a female thread at the rear. This part is the pusher. So this is the part that extends out the front of the core and chambers a dart into the receiver when the core is pressurized. So at rest, this sits retracted, and it does that with a spring sitting on the inside. When the core is pressurized, the pusher extends, a dart is chambered in the receiver. The next part is this inner stem. This sits inside the pusher, and when the pusher extends, it slides along this. On the inside, this O-ring ensures a seal in between the stem and the inside of the pusher. Air only comes out through this central hole. These holes in the base, they allow the air coming into the core to push the pusher all the way forward. Finally, there's a thin male thread around this base piece that screws into this female thread at the back of the chamber. The final important part is this quick exhaust diaphragm that sits inside the end cap. So the end cap has our 1/8 BSP thread here that I've got a push fit screwed into, and it screws into obviously the back of the core as well. This diaphragm is where the magic comes from. When the core is pressurized, air flows in around, and this flat bit here seals against the back of the stem. That's why the air can move around through these holes and extend the pusher forward, but no air is going to come out through the center, and so firing a dart while this flat bit is pressed against the stem like so. However, when the core begins to depressurize, this diaphragm gets sucked back against the inlet, and that opens the base of the stem, and air can rush back out through the center of the stem, through the center of the pusher, and push the dart that's already chambered out through our barrel. You can see a bit of goo on the various pieces. That's just some lubrication. I'll show you how this puts together then. I'm going to pop that O-ring off. So spring sits on like so. Spacer piece sits there. And you can see just with my finger, that goes back and forth. The inner stem through the middle, and then to thread it onto these. Not too tight. Okay, we can see that's still moving. And the end cap. Screws on as well. Okay, so there is the core assembled. Let's see how this works in operation. I've got this MDVO3 valve, which works as our trigger. This is normally open configuration, so when air is connected, it flows all the way through here and pressurizes the core. When the button is pressed, air is exhausted through this little hole, actually one on both sides. That's the pressure drop that causes the quick exhaust diaphragm at the back to flip position. So if I plug this in, connect some air, you'll see straight away the core is pressurized, the pusher is extended. We'll have a dart chambered in our receiver up the front, and the whole thing is sealed. There's no air leaks. Once I press this button, while I hold it closed, air is shut off to the core. It's depressurized. The pusher is retracted because of the spring. Once I release the button, you'll see air flow back in, and the next dart is chambered. Each time I pull the trigger, air is released out the front, firing the dart. Pusher retracts, ready for the next shot. And that's how DMR core works. Now, the first thing I want to point out, it's very subtle, but if you look closely, you might notice that this blaster is no longer clear. Instead, it's red. This didn't come red. I painted it. The paint I used is VHT Nightshades. It's an automotive paint. I've used this on a bunch of worker products in the past. Swordfish, Prophecy, Cheetah, Talon Mags, and now Harrier's got the same treatment. Second thing is the 3D printed pieces that I'm using. So I'll start at the front. This piece here, you've got a pick rail with a couple of rings either side. That sits in the front part of the blaster, and this takes the place where the pump slide would normally sit. Of course, we don't need that with a DMR core conversion, so that gives me a bit of extra Picatinny there. I'll put a foregrip at the front for a bit of ergonomics. So that one comes in the file set from Sabre. A few bits that don't that I've sourced from the community. You might see in here we've got a safety delete. That's just a little rectangular piece, one on either side. That covers up that hole. I don't really want a safety. I've got this flared magwell. So that just slides on like so. I've also got this alternate mag release. And what this does is uses this screw post and then lets me use my middle finger here as another way of using the mag release lever. So those community pieces I'll put links to in the description. The other parts from Sabre's file set are the trigger, this spacer that sits at the front of the core, and the grip piece that holds my valve. Now there's three parts to this, left and right side. You can see I've got some screws holding those together. And there's this lever that's held in place with a long, narrow grub screw, and that interfaces with the button that activates the valve, and of course that's pressed by the trigger. This set also comes with handguard parts that connect from here up to here. If you want to use those, fantastic, go for it. I decided not to. I'm not a huge fan of the metal handguard piece that comes with it originally, but I also wanted to make use of this secondary mag release piece, which of course you can't do if you've got your handguard piece in. And the last part from Sabre's kit is this spacer. That sits at the front of the DMR core, like so. And that ensures that this sits in exactly the right place here. Now, it's got 4 holes there, which correspond to the 4 holes at the front of the core. We only want to use 2 of those. These holes are also important for air flowing into the core in between cycles. So we don't want to close off all of those. So that'll sit over like that. 2 screws will hold that in place, while the other 2 holes allow for airflow. Okay, let's talk about shell work. Unlike the Seagull mod, the Harrier has quite a bit less work that you need to do modifying the shell. Really, it's this part in the grip here on both sides that you just need to smooth down to follow this profile. And that'll ensure that the grip piece sits nice and flush with the inside of the shell. There's a screw post here that you lose, so you just grind that flat, and the same on the underside. And that's pretty much it. There's no need to work at the back on either side to make space for the air hose. There's just enough space where the Harrier plunger tube sits to reuse that perfectly for the DMR core without needing to make other cuts in the blaster shell, which is great. One more thing you do need to do, you might notice in the grip piece there's a little hole here. There's one of those on both sides. What you'll need to do is when you've lined that up, drill a little hole in line with that so you can put a screw through from both sides. You can see this one's already in place. That'll go through the grip into that printed piece. I also cut an angle on this side, just using this tip of my Dremel for the countersunk screw to sit in relatively flat. Now that's pretty much all there is to modify this plastic. It's a really, really simple mod once you've got Saber's pieces printed and ready to go. So to assemble, I'll pop in a couple of these screws. That'll give me my correct spacing. To help sandwich this in between the two halves of the blaster, I'll use heat shrink over this whole part. So let me go and do that. Okay, that's done. Now, connecting the pneumatics. So my valve here has a straight push fit. That will be my air in where I connect my remote line. The back here, there's a 90-degree push fit. One end screwed into the valve, the other with this bit of hose. And I've measured this to the right length. And then at the back of the DMR core, another 90-degree push fit. And so these just clip together like so. And then this will be in exactly the right place. So let's assemble. That trigger spring is probably optional. Now I just want to tuck the hose in as I'm applying a little bit of pressure. Put that together and push back on the core a little bit. All right, that's in the right place. That one of the grip, you can see, sits relatively flat now. That'll be covered with the rubber grip anyway, but we don't want too much of a lump there. I can feel when I pull the trigger, the hinged piece pressing on the valve button. So before I go any further, I can actually test this one with some air. My remote line connector slots in like so. And as soon as I've connected my air, the pusher has extended. Now when I pull the trigger, you can see the air coming out. While I'm holding the trigger, the pusher has retracted. Okay, I'll pop some more screws in. Okay, I think that's everything in the back half. Now the front half, this holds the receiver for the DMR core. One side is smooth where the dart goes in. The other has this female thread. That's where our barrel will attach. And we want this to line up with just about the front edge of this part here. Now, there's no cutting required, but perhaps a little gentle persuasion to have that sit in the right place. Then these two halves slide together. Okay, that should be everything in the right place. And my barrel will screw in. And because these are mostly Saber parts, what would this be without a Saber B-car? Stock got the same paint treatment. Just realised I won't be able to slide the foregrip on while this is connected. I'll pop that on later. Rubber grip slides on. And the top Picatinny rail completes. Okay, I think we can say this one's done. So, Saber DMR core, designed by Spectre, built by Saber. Saber parts in the grip, trigger, spacer, and front Picatinny rail. Harrier barrel, Saber B-car. Got my foregrip up the front. A couple of community pieces for extra tactical points. The original stock, all painted Nightshades red. Load some darts, connect your air, and this one's ready to take out on the field. So there you have it. That's the DMR Core Harrier mod, brought to you by Spectre, Saber, and a little bit of Andrew G. All up, quite an easy mod to do, and I can't wait to get this one out on the field. Once again, don't forget to hit that like button and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.